Hi everyone, David Aragona and Mike Beer here taking a look at one of the undercard Grade 1 events on Travers Saturday at Saratoga. The race taking place right before the Travers is the Grade 1 Forego, going the 7/8 distance for the older horses, and really interesting field of 11 runners signed on, led by the number 4 Danno. But before we get to the field for this race, I want to remind everybody that we launched a podcast recently. It's called Off the Track, hosted by our colleague Gino Piccolo, who's been doing a great job interviewing some really interesting guests, including Katie Davis, Mark Cassie. We recently had on Kendrick Carmouche. I think Gino's going to interview Doug O'Neill in short order. So you definitely want to check out Off the Track podcast. Some really interesting conversations going on with racing personalities on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel, as well as any channels where you get your podcasts. Well, Mike, as I mentioned, 11 horses in this Forego, and Danno, I think we can fairly say at this point, has taken over the sprint division. He's won 2 races in a row at the Grade 3 and Grade 2 level, but those are races that he's beaten some pretty talented horses, including main rival Mullikin, who's back in this spot. And if Danno holds his form, he's going to be really tough in races just like this right on through the end of the year.
Yeah, and he's one of the horses too, David, where at least to this point in his career, you don't have to worry about him showing up and running his race. That's what he does every single time. You know, as of now, he's the leader of this division, and he's supposed to be really tough right back in this race. But this field I thought was a little top heavy. I also think it's pretty competitive. There's some nice horses in here.
Yeah, this is the way the Grade 1 races are supposed to be. You've got the top-heavy stars in the race, but you've also got some connections that are taking shots in a race that really matters and has some prestige to it, and horses that are in good form right now that are trying to step up in class, and we'll see how they do if they can stack up against that favorite, the number 4, Danno. Let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector for this Forego. And Mike, if this field holds together after scratch time on Saturday morning, does kind of feel like some early pace has to develop in here, because there are plenty of horses that run their best races when they are forwardly placed. I think the good news for our favorite Danno is pace doesn't seem to matter too much for him. He can be forward. He could also close from off the pace.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, yeah, he wants to be, sort of up close or maybe sort of mid-pack anyway, but, a fast pace is not going to affect him. And I certainly didn't feel like it was going to affect him as much maybe as, his main rival, Mullikin, who's the 7, who I think is more of a speed type horse who wants to be involved early. Maybe a fast pace hurts him more. I don't know, David. If you want to talk about this a little more, I understand there are some horses that are up in class here. Maybe they're just taking shots. They got to go in this race and it'll push this pace. The longer I looked at it, I was less sure that this pace was going to be blazing. I guess we'll see how it all plays out. I mean, certainly they have the 3 Full Moon Madness up there as part of a fast pace. I don't see that.
Yeah, I think this pace and how it develops is really going to depend on those 2 Brad Cox runners that are drawn down towards the inside, Most Wanted and Bishop's Bay. I know they're shown further back on the pace projector. That's because they're coming out of some slower paced 2-turn races or races at a mile or more on the dirt. It remains to be seen if they have the sprint speed to attain forward position, because they are both horses that want to be forward early, and drawing the inside, their jockeys might be under the gun to try to show speed. We'll see if they're quick enough to stay with horses like Full Moon Madness or Mullikin or Hold My Bourbon, a horse who does seem committed to going from the outside. Let's go through this field, beginning with our conversation of those Cox runners that I was just mentioning, Mike, and I'm kind of curious to get your take on not just how good you think these horses are, but also how you think their trips are going to work out, especially with the number 1, Most Wanted, a horse who has been in just slow-paced race after slow-paced race. When you look at his PPs in Timeform US, where we color code the fractions red for fast and blue for slow, he's got just blue color-coded fractions splashed all across his running lines, and those have been in longer races. But then you look at his pedigree, he's the half-brother to Life is Good, who was a really fast horse. It's kind of curious they focused on longer races for most of his career, because it does seem like somewhere in there, he's got the speed to be a pretty talented 1-turn horse. I just wonder if he can do it from the rail.
Me too. I do think he's talented, and obviously there's nothing to quibble about with his form. They've run him 8 times. He's been in the exacta at all of them. He's won 5 of them. He's in really good form right now. I'm still going back to the, you're open, the way that you talked about this horse at the Open. That's exactly how I was looking at him. He hasn't been in any fast-paced races. And this race, whether or not you think they're going to be blazing up front or not, they're going to go way faster in here. I think it really compromises this horse. I think he's one of the contenders in here for sure, because his form's too good, but he's one of the contenders that I was maybe most against in this race, just because I think the trip might not work out for him.
Yeah, there are just a lot of unknowns with this horse. Is he fast enough? And can he rate if they decide they're going to rate with
Right.
him? Because we don't really know. He did it on debut and hasn't tried it since then. I do think he's one of the most talented horses in this race. If the trip can work out, we'll just see if it does. The number two, Bishop's Bay, has a very similar profile to the Brad Cox runner that we just talked about. Another one that has run well in every single start of his career. He's never been out of the exacta in 10 races, and two of those defeats came to some really good horses like Arcangelo and Two Phils back during his 3-year-old season. We'll take a look at his most recent race in the Salvatore Mile, where he was just facing a field that was overmatched against him. He was able to contest the front end through some moderate fractions and pull away late. And like, I can lodge some of the same criticisms against him that I did his stablemate. He's another horse that hasn't faced the most competitive pace in a while, and now he's turning back in distance.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be interesting to see how he handles it. I mean, this horse hasn't sprinted since his debut back in early 2023. It's been all, sort of longer two-turn races for him. They're all, I mean, every one of his races is good. And I think it's only fair to point out that, at least in my opinion, he was cut out to be a really good horse. He was a really good 3-year-old. He missed a ton of time. Since he's come back, I like the way that Cox has handled them, first of all, since they've come back. I also really like the fact that even though it's not a sprint technically, he went the 1-turn mile, 2 starts back. I think it's maybe one of the best races he's ever run. I also, and we'll see what kind of trip, because I'm worried about the trip because I do think he wants to be forward, but he's also, and you can go back, you can see this in every one of his races. He is dead game through the stretch. This horse does not want to be passed by horses. If he can get himself involved here and not get sort of outpaced early and have too much to do, if he's involved in the stretch of this race, I think he's going to be really tough. I think he's a good horse.
The number three, Full Moon Madness, is going to be a big price in this race, and a little tough to make a case for at this point, Mike, especially given that it's the 7-furlong distance. And I feel like this horse is a little better going slightly shorter than this. He was contesting a fast pace in the Carter, couldn't get the 7 furlongs that day. This is probably a tougher spot. They skipped the Vanderbilt. I think he was entered and scratched in that race, and they found another tough grade 1 event.
Yeah, this one might be even tougher. I'm a fan of this horse. I don't like him in races like this.
The number 4, Bookham Danno, is the horse that I pegged as the 8-5 morning line favorite, and a lot of that has to do with this most recent effort that we'll take a look at in the Grade 2 Alfred G. Vanderbilt, where he ran a 111 buyer. We haven't seen buyers like that in the sprint division too often in the past 5 years or so. And Bookham Danno, Mike, he's just been improving with every start this year. He was an unlucky loser 3 back in that Grade 1 at Churchill Downs, but he's come to Saratoga in his last 2 starts, and he obviously loves it up there. But he has improved his buyer speed figures, beating his main rival Mullikin soundly in each of these 2 races, and stretching out slightly to the 7 furlongs doesn't feel like it's going to bother this horse at all.
Yeah, the distance isn't going to affect him at all. Pace usually doesn't really affect him at all. It doesn't matter what track you run him at either. He's not the kind of horse who carries, he is the kind of horse who carries his track around with him. It just doesn't matter. He's a really, really good horse. He was so good winning last time, David, and I think even maybe the more important race, at least for me, is the True North 2 starts back, where it's a sloppy track. Mullikin's a really nice horse. I thought Mullikin ran his eyeballs out in the True North that day, and this horse just came and got him at the end. He's just really, really good, and he is the horse to beat.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, if you believe that 111 buyer, he's probably going to win this race. I've got some doubts about how high that number came back, but he's got a resume that makes him the horse to beat in this spot. The number 5, Extra Anejo, is a horse that is going to have to run faster, especially if Bookham Danno and Mullikin show up with their recent speed figures. Extra Anejo just isn't quite as good as those horses. He did win a graded stakes going this distance in the Commonwealth 3 back, but he was facing a weaker field that day. And since then, Mike, he was no match for a tough group in the Churchill Downs, and couldn't even beat Listed Stakes Company last time at Churchill.
Yeah, really didn't like his race last time in particular. I thought he got a great trip in that race. It just wasn't good enough. I guess, listen, he's another one. It felt like maybe he was cut out to be a really nice horse, and it just hasn't happened for him. If you wanted to try to make a case for him at a big price, I would just say that the Commonwealth, the win over this distance back off the layoff in April, it was a really fast-paced 7 furlong race where he sat back and he made 1 run, and maybe he can get that kind of trip in here.
The next horse we're going to talk about, the number 6, Crazy Mason, he is going to hope that pace projector is right. And all of those horses that are shown forward are gunning for the lead from the start, because this horse is a deep, deep closer who appreciates any pace that he can get. And he got that pace 3 back in the Carter going this distance. We'll take a look at the stretch run of that race, Mike. And This is Crazy Mason at his best. When the race sets up for him, he's able to save some ground on the turns, tip out at the top of the stretch, and unleash this run. And it's not just the race coming back to him. This horse has a wicked turn of foot for a dirt horse. Doesn't matter which lead he's on. You could just see he is quickening the turnover in the stride. He's trying so hard to go after these leaders that he's able to reel them in coming onto the wire. And that horse that he's running down here, Quince Brew, I mean, he's the horse that really made Bishop's Bay work, who we talked about already as a contender in this race. Quince Brew, he's not running here, but he would be a contender in this race. Now, since then, Crazy Mason finished behind Bookham Danno and Mullikin in the True North. Didn't think the pace really set up for him that day. He was trying at the end, just had too much to do. They tried to ship out to Southern California to contest the Bing Crosby last time. Brought a jockey that wasn't really, well, that had ridden him before, but isn't really too experienced in Grade 1 races in that spot, and got badly outrun early, couldn't make up the ground. I think this is a better spot for him. It's just a really tough field.
It's a tough field, and listen, his running style is problematic because he's really pace dependent. If they don't go fast enough in front of him, it's just going to be hard for him not only to pass a bunch of horses in a big field, but then to pass horses who just might be a little bit better than him too. So he needs a little bit of help. But you're right to point out, not only how strong a closer he is, but how good his form has been since they've turned him back to sprint. And listen, David, I thought he ran a super underrated race in the True North. I thought he ran really well in there. And even, you expect fast paces when you go to California. I didn't even think they went that fast in the Bing Crosby. And I thought he had no chance in there. This horse is a little bit dirtied up, but he needs things to break his way. But he's a little interested in here at a price.
Number 7, Mullikin, has been competing against Bookham Danno in his last few starts. He finished just behind him in the Churchill Downs when Bookham Danno was 4th and Mullikin was 5th. And then the last couple of times, Bookham Danno's had his number. He's won the True North and the AG Vanderbilt, and Mullikin has been passed by him on both occasions. Now, Mike, you could make the case that Mullikin is a real 7-furlong specialist, and getting back out to this distance is going to help him. His career box might suggest that he did win this race last year. But speaking about that, when you go back and look at that sprint division in 2024, it did kind of feel, especially looking at it in retrospect, like Mullikin was taking advantage of some horses that just weren't quite as tough as those that we have in the sprint division this year in 2025.
Yeah, that's true. It's also worth pointing out too that when he won this race last year, it wasn't a strong field, and it felt like that day he had one horse to beat that day, and that horse just totally blew the brake in there, and then he had nobody to beat. So he sort of took advantage for sure when he won this race last year. That being said, his form has been excellent since then. And I know that there aren't any wins since he won this race last year. He's run nothing but good races since then. But he's still, each of his last 4 starts, he's faced Bookham Danno, and Bookham Danno has run better than him all 4 times.
Mike, let's go on to some bigger prices drawn in the outside portion of the starting gate. The number 8, Scotland, is a horse who's run some big races during his career. He was actually a horse that was single-digit odds in the Travers going back to 2023. Since then, he's concentrated on shorter distances, and he came back off a long layoff last time at Saratoga, catching a muddy track against high-level allowance competition. And he finished 3rd there, Mike. I felt like he ran the best race given the wide trip that he got.
I agree. He ran really, really well last time. And that was a pretty decent field too. I mean, listen, he ran a good race that day. I do think this is what he wants to do. 6 furlongs, probably too short for him. 7 furlongs to a mile around 1 turn. It's probably what he really wants. The question is, is he good enough to beat horses like this, assuming they all show up? And I couldn't convince myself that he was, but he's got some things going for him.
I couldn't quite convince myself of that either, but I will add, in addition to getting that wide trip last time, I felt like July 12th was one of the few days at the Saratoga meet where there was a significant bias. A lot of horses riding the rail seemed to do well that day. We'll see how much that worked against Scotland. The number 9, Over and Ollie, is another big price that's coming into this race in good form. He switched into the Rick Dutrow barn last time out, coming off a layoff at Saratoga, just got right to the front end, was able to dominate a second-level allowance race on the lead. The waters get a lot deeper here, Mike, but this is a horse that's run the 2 best races in his career at Saratoga.
He really does like this track. I mean, I guess they've ultimately found out that he is a dirt horse. He's got a bunch of good dirt races on his card, even though they didn't start him out really on this surface. I don't know, man. I understand why they want to maybe maybe they won't even wind up running here, considering how the field shapes up. But I understand why they wanted to at least take a look here. This horse has been in good form. He comes off of a really nice performance.
Another horse coming off a gate to wire allowance win at Saratoga is the number 10, Hold My Bourbon for the Saffie Joseph barn. Switched into the Saffie Joseph stable just a couple starts ago. Ran well going 2 turns at Churchill Downs back in June, and then came back with this early August allowance win, got right to the front end, and was able to hold off some late challenges at the end, going the 7 furlong distance, Mike, but another one where he's just stepping up against much tougher company here.
Yeah, ran really well in that race last time, but this race is so much tougher. He's another one, he's still relatively lightly raced. It feels like they had a tough time early on deciding, what kind of horse he was. A lot of different surfaces, a lot of different distances. He's a dirt sprinter. He ran really well at this distance last time, but this is probably going to be too tough for him.
And rounding out the field on the outside, the number 11, Sullivan, another horse coming off a 7 furlong victory at Saratoga, a horse that does seem to like this distance and racetrack. You might sense a theme here with these long shots. They're not without a chance because they're in good form, and Sullivan is definitely one of those off a recent trainer switch to John Ortiz, ran the best race of his career. And Mike, this is a horse that I know we had talked about a couple times in the past. He had shown some antics in a lot of prior races, and it felt like a lot of those went away here. He changed leads on cue, finished up straight, and was able to nail a pretty good horse at the end in the Wine Steward, but this field is stronger.
Yeah, it's really, really tough. At least, as far as the long shot conversation goes, maybe I sort of respect him a little bit more than some of the others, if only because, I know that he didn't win a bunch of races last year as a 3-year-old, but this horse ran one good race after another in tough competition. It feels like he got right back on track last time with the trainer change. I mean, I can't see him beating this field, David, but I respect him more than some of the other longer prices.
I don't have a clock in front of me, Mike. I think we're going a little overtime on this preview, but this race feels like it merits it because there's so many interesting things going on. Let's go to picks for this grade 1 Forego, and I think we landed in slightly different directions. We both respect the number 4 Danno and have him in there, but there are some intriguing horses stepping up into this race, and you've got one of them on top.
Yeah, I respect Danno and Mullikin, but to me, Danno is the horse to beat in this race, and I'm not way against him. But the longer I looked at it, the more I talked myself into Bishop's Bay. I want to bet this horse in here. I do not mind them going 7 furlongs around 1 turn here. The trip's going to be really important, but I think he's a little underrated, and I think he's going to be a really good price.
Mike, I'm a huge fan of the number 6 Crazy Mason. I'm a sucker for horses with this kind of running style, and he needs pace to close into, but he is such a good closing sprinter, and there is a good chance he could get the pace in this race if this field holds together. So 6-1-4-8 for me, and 2-4-7-6 for Mike in the grade 1 Forego race 12 on Travers Saturday at Saratoga. Good luck if you're playing the races later this weekend.